I think me and Chris were talking about getting into some Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And we had both watched a video, and I think that I'll have to edit in like the title or something, but it was about Jordan Peterson's belief in God, specifically when he's asked if he believes in God.
Yeah.
But I think that the purpose of the video is actually him defining what it means to believe in God. At least that's what I got from it.
Yeah.
So what was your takeaway?
Yeah. Well, I guess I like Jordan Peterson and I respect him. I guess I'll just say what I wanted to say was like I really have appreciated and benefited from a lot of his like more like self-help, I guess. I wouldn't want to say that, like self-development content, and like his older stuff that he would talk about of like who you want to be, like what it means to be a man, what it means to like improve yourself and like walk forward in life and kind of accept where you are and how that might not be where you want to be. Like a lot of his older stuff I really appreciated and I benefited from. His newer stuff is just, it seems to me very political and very like in the weeds of metaphysics and theology, which are places that I don't personally like to go a lot. Some people do, but I just don't benefit as much from that content anymore, especially with the political stuff. I'm not even saying that I disagree, like no comment on the political stuff as far as for right now. But like, that's not my kind of content that I really consume anymore. And I think it's just not really him at his best. But that's my own personal opinion. And like his newer stuff on God, I'm really excited to talk about that today since I've given it some thought. I've heard this kind of position before, articulated differently than what Peterson said in this video. And I've heard his view alluded to, but before Will sent me this video to discuss, I'd never heard him actually present kind of fully his own like position and how he would defend himself. So I'm glad that I got to hear kind of him in one coherent argument giving it today to discuss.
Yeah, so that's so I would say that my view on Jordan Peterson is it's definitely evolved over time. I think that I might actually kind of be more in agreement with you on that, in that I more align myself with a lot of how Jordan Peterson articulated his beliefs and ideas like earlier into his like celebrity career, I'll say, just online.
I guess so.
But I did appreciate a lot of his ideas on kind of what it means to like pick yourself up and go forward and develop as a person and be honest with yourself. I think those are ideas that are just really underappreciated and ideas that I always try to stay true to even before I met Peterson, is why I appreciated his words on that so much. But I do kind of think and you know this is I would never make a judgment claim to Jordan Peterson's character because I don't know him. I think that that's something that people always get too ahead of themselves with, like, this guy's a hack or whatever. And there are a lot of people that say that Jordan Peterson is a hack, and I can see why. And I don't disagree with the points that they make about that. And that would be the more like pessimistic side, or pessimistic kind of views that I have towards Jordan Peterson. I think that when it comes to his belief in God, it does seem a little bit tiptoey to me, I'll be blunt. I think that he has great ideas, and I think that what he says has value, but I think that it may just be that he hates simple questions. And I think that actually in the video I did note that that we'll get into that, but he does have an issue, it seems, with questions that seem to be on like a black and white kind of scale. And I think that's a little bit troublesome for me. I think that every question surely does have a gray area, but I tend to feel like I pick up some kind of intellectual dishonesty, whether it's intentional or not, in some of the things that Jordan Peterson says or how he answers questions. And I think that for me is like the critiques that I have about Peterson, but that's kind of where I stand with him. I don't know if that's really that coherent, but I would say that he's a person who has great ideas, very articulate, and a very caring person, very passionate person, a very intelligent person. But I think that those qualities stumble in some topics that he talks about, and in some situations that he's in.
I'll say I do like Jordan Peterson. I've seen him live. I told you that, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him live here in North Carolina. Really enjoyed it. Again, I really don't necessarily agree with his like theological or biblical takes, but I really appreciate the value that I think he adds to the conversation. If all it is just like opening up conversations and starting conversations, just like this one.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I think it adds. It's kind of in conversations, especially I think amongst like younger men who are interested in these topics. Jordan Peterson seems to be kind of a hot button personality, and I think like just like a stimulus. That's what I was going to say. Into the conversation is what my experience of him has been, just in like moving conversations forward and kind of bringing a different perspective, even if that is eventually rejected. Like I've still appreciated having discussions about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of his best qualities.
I think that might be what he's going for, but I don't know. That's kind of more of a meta narrative kind of thing.
But I could see him as that kind of person who wants to spark that kind of
reaction.
Yeah. So when it came to the video,
Will sent me the video.
Yes.
Yeah. So what? Tell me about the video. What'd you find it? Why were you interested in it?
So there was a collection of videos. We decided on this one. I personally had a preference towards doing this video first. I think because, again, just going back to my roots, like this is a topic that I'm deeply interested in, and I was very interested to hear Jordan Peterson's kind of whole thought on his belief in God, and I thought that the video was in a more literal sense about him being asked the question, does he believe in God, and and so then he kind of digresses into his. I think he had like 3 points, like three categories of how he would answer that question. I can't remember what they were specifically, but
okay, go ahead. Do you have an idea what they were?
Not quite. I think it was.
Well, first he said personal. Like, is that what you're thinking about, right?
Yeah.
He said, "Why do you care?" That's a personal question, and then he like asked like, "What does it even mean to believe something?" Right? Those were the first two categories.
There was, and I think his main point though was, and this is what I was going to get into, was he seems to define belief in God as he splits it up further into two more subcategories. One of which is saying that you believe in God, and the other one is acting as if you believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, and this is not just from this video that we've seen, but I've heard Jordan Peterson say on many occasions that his answer to that question, does he believe in God, seems to always be, I act as if God exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's kind of the main idea for him. And then what that means, we could get into. And he also has some other ways of phrasing that and defining that, but that's kind of, for me, that was my main topic of interest when he was talking about that. So
the acting as if.
Yeah. So what would you say about his kind of definition on belief in God and what he has to say?
I think I'd agree with your like summation of what he said. And I think I like the second piece of that really is what he like spent the whole video talking about and kind of where his view sits now as far as I'm concerned. You've definitely watched a lot more of his content and like talking about this than I have. But like it seems like he really zeroed in as the video went on into like the belief and like the just like zeroing on a definition of believe. It seemed like what his whole kind of argument was contingent on, that like, what does it mean if I say that I believe in something? Like, am I just intellectually assenting to the fact that XYZ might exist or might be efficacious or have something to do with me or you or the world or something? Or is it like affecting my actions? Because like it doesn't matter if I just believe something exists if it doesn't affect my life at all. It seemed to be what he was saying. Would you agree with like that assessment?
Yeah, and this is interesting because this is actually kind of what I would have assumed or imagined that you might have disagreed with him on, because it seems that he
that
kind
was just
of
me summarizing his position, but yeah.
But I did want to hear what you had to say about that, because I found it interesting that he makes a distinction between, and I think it's a fair distinction, between just saying that you believe in God, and even maybe truly believing and, being honest about that, saying that you believe in God, but then also just not living accordingly to that belief.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Jordan is saying in that situation that it would be dishonest to call yourself a true believer if you're not acting accordingly to what he would say, I think, is like a true Christian.
Yeah.
And I think he even said, you mentioned in the video that some would say that Jesus was the only real Christian, or the only true Christian. I think that was
I don't know who said it, but the quote was like, someone has said to Peterson, I think he said that, like, the only true Christian that's ever lived died on the cross, or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I was curious to hear what your thoughts or remarks on that would be.
Yeah. I definitely disagree with Peterson. This is where, like, I really would diverge. And I'll get it, maybe like later I can get into what I actually really appreciate about his position, and how I have actually personally benefited both from, like, his own kind of speaking on this topic, as well as just this kind of idea in general. I've heard it called like the noble lie or something like that. Have you ever heard that term before?
No.
Of like I've heard others articulate Peterson's position as the noble lie, which is like believing that something is true and acting as if it was true, even though intellectually you don't believe it's true. And I don't think Peterson even would say he intellectually believes it's not true, but just like intellectually he's either unsure or he thinks it's not true. And so he's nobly believing a lie because it benefits himself and the world around him, I suppose.
So like a more pragmatic kind of
pragmatic
adoption of...
And I still think pragmatism is good and important, but I don't think at the expense of truth. So I guess, this is my response. So I wrote down a few things as we were in the car. Will wrote them for me as I was driving. I didn't write while I was driving.
I attempted to.
And it looks good. So when he said that, of like, what does belief mean? Like, is all you're saying like that you intellectually believe? Because like, why does that matter if you intellectually believe? You should be acting, and if you're this is what got me. It's like, if you're acting as if, it doesn't actually matter if you believe. Now, on a very face value service level, like to another believer, to someone who is a Christian, to someone who is a theist even, or whatever, the whole spectrum of things, I want to say yes. That's a very practical and very pragmatic way of looking at your faith, and a very actionable way of looking at like your relationship with God, I suppose. Because in my own life, this is what I like about this position, and what I have benefited from, is that like trying to get like my theology or my beliefs right, and in the right order and in the right place, and like fully worked out and perfectly systematized before I act or before I do something. That's kind of paralyzed me, and I think it can be paralyzing. And so I think Jordan Peterson's and just like the noble lie is almost freeing in that sense. But where I would diverge, it really made me think of some scripture, as Peterson was talking about, from the Bible. First in the book of James, where the book of James, it's a letter, an epistle, historically is the word to use, that James, this person, who is traditionally been understood as the brother of Jesus, like actually one of Jesus' brothers, whether that's a blood brother or a cousin is debated, but a first century Christian, James, who was alive during the time of Jesus, writing a letter to Christians in the first century, after the time of Jesus. And something that he says in there is, you say that God is one, speaking to the people receiving the letter. You say that God is one, and you do well. Meaning, that's true. There's one God, we are monotheists, God is one, we believe that.
Right.
And then he goes on to say, even the demons believe and shudder. in which he's saying, even those who fight against God and resist God's power, if there is such a supernatural entity as demons, which I believe in, but that's completely a different topic than what we're talking about now. Even the demons believe and shudder. Like, there's supernatural entities or personal entities as demons who do believe that there is one God. They are monotheists in that strict sense, but they are not Christians, I suppose you would say. They don't believe in or trust God, perhaps in the second sense that Peterson's talking about. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's really, I guess, kind of where my mind is at, is that, like, you can have the latter without, you can have the former without the latter. Like, you can certainly believe God exists and have it have no impact on your life whatsoever, and not be, like, living as a theist or as a Christian or as a Muslim or whatever you would fall in that categories. Like, and certainly I even personally would question whether or not you actually believe in what you're saying if you just completely don't care and it doesn't impact your life at all. If, like, you're saying that I believe X, Y, and Z are right, X, Y, and Z are wrong, I believe in the Bible, this, that, and the other, and your life does not reflect that in any way, I would question whether or not you actually believe that in the fullest sense. But I don't think you can say that the question doesn't matter. And, like, say, well, do you believe in God? Why does it matter? Why are you even asking me that? What do you mean by believe? Do you believe it in this sense or in that sense? Because I think, like you said, it's a little intellectually dishonest to say, like, well, why does it matter? Let's just think of all these different definitions of believe. If what's actually being asked is, well, do you intellectually... I think those are two different questions.
Yeah.
And what's being popularly asked when someone says, do you believe in God, is, do you intellectually assent to this idea? And you can answer yes or no to that, truthfully, personally, even if it doesn't affect your life.
And I'll just interject just really quickly, just to say that, and this is what I was talking about when I was saying that I think that Jordan Peterson just has a problem with simple, direct questions that are like that. And I
think a follow-up question could be, okay, what does that mean to you? And that will certainly deepen the discussion, and then, like, more deeply help you understand and get to know the other person and what their faith actually means to them. It might mean nothing, in which case you would say, well, why do you believe in God if it means nothing to you?
Yeah.
But they can still honestly say for themselves that they do, even if it doesn't affect them.
Yeah, and I've noticed that. I think the frustrating, like, thing that I've noticed about Jordan is that, and honestly, maybe this is justified because he's been in the public space so much, and undoubtedly he has faced lots of nasty people who say and do nasty things to him, but he has this careful wording where it's like he is trying to be one step ahead of what you're asking. And I've noticed that, so if you ask him something like, do you believe in God, I can almost see the gears turn through his face, where it's like, he doesn't want to say yes because he knows the next thing that's coming is, well, then why do you say
God,
such
X,
and
Y,
such?
Z, or whatever.
And so I think that he wants to avoid trap questions, which is, again, fair, because so many people have asked him trap questions. But I also think that someone of Jordan's caliber should be more aware, in my opinion, of the damage of tap dancing around that question than just kind of facing it head on. Because if it is truly a trap question, then that's a problem. And that's worth addressing, in my opinion. And if you're just dealing with someone who just wants to, berate you or, yell at you or make a clown out of you on the internet, like, I think Jordan would hand-wave that person and just not really let that get to him. So, anyways, but I just wanted to say that because I do think that that's kind of an issue that I have with Jordan in a lot of how he answers questions. That being said, I'm really glad that you brought up that whole distinction between, like, addressing what he said about just saying that you believe, or I'll say actually believing in God and acting as if you believe in God, because they are two different things. And I wouldn't say that
I wouldn't even say actually believing, because I think actually believing would be the second sense, but it's like intellectually believing. Maybe is that what you meant by, like, actually?
Yeah, like being aware or being convinced of that God exists.
Yeah.
Because you could be convinced that God exists, but you could still, be an asshole.
Yeah. Well, which is exactly what James is saying in his writings about even the demons believe and shudder, which is what popped into my mind when Peterson was talking.
Yeah. So I think that was a
which
Interesting.
is why, and that popped into my mind because it was like, this is my question with Peterson a lot of times as he's talking about the Bible. He certainly like knows the Bible. I think I don't even know. Like, I don't know if he's read the whole Bible. I don't know if he's actually had any discussions with actual biblical scholars. And part of that is refreshing to hear new takes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like, okay, have you read James? Like, do you know that he says this as well? Like, can you bring that into the conversation at all? That like this is something that's discussed in Christian scriptures.
We should look into that later because I feel like he has, but I'm also not sure.
Yeah. I guess I didn't want to cut you off. Do you have more? Because I had a second point there.
Oh no, go ahead.
And I guess the second scripture was even Jesus himself said that like you will know someone's faith by their fruits, or you can know a person by their fruits. And like how they act is an indicator of what they believe, and what they believe, like as they're acting, if you see fruit, they're doing well. Okay, we don't need to get into discussion of what fruit is, but they are. Well,
yeah,
I guess we don't need to talk about that here.
Okay.
Because I mean, some people would say that means material wealth. Some people would just say inner peace. Some people would say some combination of the both. So we don't need to get into that here.
Yeah.
But like, you will know them by their fruits, and I think that's some of what Peterson's getting at as well. Which is where I would want to say, like, absolutely, like the effect that your faith or your belief is having on you is important. But I think that does kind of sidestep the question of, does God exist? That we're talking about.
There's the question of, do you believe objectively that there is a being as described in the Christian Bible, that being exists, is a question that he just is uncomfortable with, and for whatever reason.
But I think that the discomfort he brings up and points out is fair and brings fruitful conversation, just like right now. But I also think it's a bit unnecessary.
It is. I would say as well.
Because you can answer the question and say, so I do believe in God, and why do we think that matters? And then have the exact same conversation we're having now, instead of just tiptoeing around the question.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that, and I think that's why I kind of try to focus more on what he's saying rather than like the question that he's trying to answer, because it does give an insight into how he just thinks about the world, which is interesting.
Which I'm interested in, and I've definitely benefited from.
But I would not call Jordan Peterson a Christian.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, and so I think that's something that I don't actually know how controversial that is. I feel like most people would actually agree with that he's not a Christian. But
I think so. But again, I don't know. I want to first say I don't know. It would appear to me that he's not. Basically, I don't know.
What is interesting, and again, this is kind of where I feel like it's a little bit dishonest, is that Jordan Peterson would actually not confirm or deny that. Yeah. He's like kind of in a weird superposition of,
you believe I'm not a Christian, okay.
Yeah.
And he just like doesn't really care.
Yeah.
Which in one sense, good for him.
Yeah.
Like really, like he's living his own life. He has his own beliefs. I do view him as a very, like, personally honest person.
Yeah.
At least for me. It sounds like you might disagree with this. I used the term intellectually dishonest earlier. I don't think I would necessarily say that about him. I think he's needlessly complicating this question. But I don't actually see him as an intellectually dishonest person, if that means speaking what you believe. I think, and this is just a personal thing, this is just my sense on him. It doesn't have to be true or not. Like he really speaks from his heart and like what he really believes. So he's like, I don't understand why that question is important, so I'm going to answer this way. I think he actually believes that. I don't think he's like playing a part or like trying. I mean, maybe he is. I don't know, but so I respect him for that, for being not willing to like stake his claim if he doesn't actually feel confident enough to make a claim. But it still just is needless.
It's weirdly evasive.
Yeah.
But I would also agree that, I mean, look, fundamentally, and I think this is what a lot of people make the mistake of doing when they have conversations like this and they start forming their own opinions, is that I think regardless of context of this kind of discourse, like at the fundamental human level, I think he's a great guy.
Me too.
I think that he's a good person who I would be friends with and have a cool conversation with and like to get to know. But yeah, so personality aside, I it is interesting. Maybe intellectual dishonesty is the wrong wording. I think that phrasing has kind of a malicious intent kind of attached to it by the public. I don't necessarily think it has to be malicious. I think that people can be intellectually dishonest in a passive, innocent way. You know, like if you're not, I don't know, if you're hanging on to a specific like worldview or way of thinking about something for the sake of, you know, some kind of personal interest, then that I would say that's an example of intellectual dishonesty. But it doesn't mean that it's inherently malicious.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, everyone is guilty of that to some point. Jordan Peterson is probably apparently guilty of that in many situations, just like all of us. But I do, getting back to like the content that he was talking about, I want to say that, and this is kind of really what I was interested in when he was talking about acting as if you believe in God. To me, this implies, and I'm sure you'll disagree with this, but I think this is interesting, that to me this implies that he is actually separating morals from God. Because acting as if you believe in God, that if key word in there, I think is the key term.
Yeah,
because
I actually put a note about this. So continue. Yeah.
So I'm interested in, and this would be a fun question to ask Peterson, but I also just want to ask you what you think about this, and what you think Peterson has to say about this. And to me, that kind of separation there, I think, is a little bit, the unity of trying to kind of combine God with morality is circular in nature. But I am interested in hearing what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, so I wrote down here because he mentioned in the video, and this might be the same kind of place you're thinking about. It was like, you know, if you think that just believing in God will be good for you, then like what? You think you're going to believe that there's some cosmic entity up in heaven and then all of a sudden now, and this is what I had you write, like all of a sudden now because you believe, like miraculously you'll be a better person? Like, what's the deal with that? Like, why do you think that would be the case? Like, it actually involves like sacrifice on your part. It actually involves like character and like effort and interest and
struggle
and persistent struggle. Absolutely, he's big on struggle, right? And like that's what like belief in God should mean. But like you say you do, but you have none of those things in your life. So do you actually? Which I think is a fair question. But like, and so then he goes on to say, you know, if you just act as if God is real, which is what he says he does, it would seem, then like I believe that God is real, so I ought to. Because I believe that God is real, I fear his judgment, is what it's... He never said those words, but it seemed to me that's what he was getting at. That there is some cosmic order that I act against or act in spite of to my own peril. I would agree with that kind of basic assessment of God's existence in one sense, but for me, that is completely missing the point of like what it actually means to have a relationship with God. And this is where my kind of question was. I had Will write as a note there, like miraculously becoming a better person. Would Peterson then believe that God's power is real? Like that having a personal relationship with God can actually, like, supernaturally is such a difficult word because people think it means like all the woozy woozy, like whatever. And that's not how I'm using it in this sense. It's like that outside of my own abilities, that God is affecting my life and working in my life and moving within myself and my being to like affect my own personal development and my own virtues, my own vices, you know, the blossoming and flowering of my virtues and the death of my own vices. Like, do I believe that God actually has an active agency in that process that I could not achieve on my own? Or if I just try harder and just believe that God's out there somewhere and somehow I guess he'll help me, but I don't actually think he exists, but I'm still going to pretend that he can, and then all of a sudden I'm able to do all of those things at the exact same rate or purpose or to the same end as a true believer who does believe in God's supernatural power. That's where I think there would be a really strong divergence, because I would, like, for me personally, I would take the view that, you know, God's power is real and I can rely on it to assist me and to help me. And I don't do that perfectly. And so I must ask myself regularly, well, do I actually believe in God? Like, do I actually believe this is true? If I'm not going to act like it is, then why do I even pretend that I think it's true? And so, like, I think that's an active part of, like, anyone's life, is questioning their beliefs and, like, wrestling with their own doubt or their own fickleness or whatever. And I don't think that it's intellectually dishonest then to still claim to be, in my case, a Christian and a believer who still struggles and fails, and who, like, has doubts, and who might suddenly realize one day that, like, oh my God, like, I'm not acting in accordance with my beliefs and what I believe to be true. Like, what's going on? And for me personally, that's a fruitful conversation and discussion to have with myself and friends. And I don't see that as a black mark against my own faith or, like, my belief in God.
Yeah.
I mean, because a core tenet of Christianity in my vision is forgiveness, and that's not to the negation of, like, wrongs or vices that I might have or things that I can do, but it's truly like a deepening, healing effect on who I am as a person and the world around me. And so I guess, like, because him saying, like, if you just, it would seem to simplify his claim. He's saying, like, if you just act as if God is real, then you'll be more honest, then you'll be more earnest, then you'll be more, then you'll work harder, then you'll get your life together. And to me, that actually is, like, perilous, because it seems to me it would all rely on my effort, and then if I fail, there's actually no one there to save me or to catch me if I just act as if God exists.
So, I'm sorry, so you're saying I might have missed something. You said that you don't like the idea of just the acting as if God exists without the believing part, because then you feel like that, like, I guess maybe foundation is a good word for it, is kind of missing. Like, there's
but I will say this. I don't dislike the idea of acting as if God exists. I think that could greatly improve someone's life. I don't want to discount the fact that someone might have, like, I know that people live this way, and that those people probably have fruitful, meaningful, and interesting and exciting lives. I absolutely believe that. Or the fact that someone might have arrived at genuine faith through this process. I think that's absolutely possible as well. I think if you don't believe in God, but you want to, and you want to get your life together, this is a personal thing, getting your life together being your own assessment of your own life, not saying that I want to put that on anybody. And so you say, like, well, I'm just going to take a leap of faith and, like, act as if, and just, like, see what happens. I think that's an amazing thing to do, and that's a very personal decision to make. So I'm not saying that that's, like, a stupid or a wrong thing to do. I would just be curious, like, especially for someone like Peterson, who has very thoroughly thought this through, and I think that's, like, a great posture to have if you're just trying to, like, change your life or try something new. But, like, for me personally, it doesn't meet the requirement of, like, that's not what I think the fullness of faith is, I guess.
Interesting. I do want to ask...
Does that make sense?
It does. And it's leading me to this next question that I want to ask you, which is, because I'm not sure how objective or subjective this question even is, but what does it mean to act as if God exists? I think that's an interesting question, because I feel like a lot of people would answer that differently.
For sure. So far, this is like a Chris interview, just so we know. And I'm always happy to answer any questions, but I also want to hear Will talk, and I have questions for you.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But just so people don't think this is like a Chris interview, if anybody watches this is for us again.
Yes.
What does it mean to act as if God exists? So are you asking me, like, what?
Like, yeah, just so... Yeah,
what would a spirit-filled or, like, a God-centered life look like?
Well, yeah, I guess, like, as a Christian, to act as
My
if...
feet are falling asleep now, too.
Yeah. it's a It's a whole game.
This is why we need chairs. We're recording in the special podcast studio, my bedroom.
Yes, and please, give funds to the Patreon so that
exclusive behind-the-scenes content. These are my Ghibli posters. That is an authentic Bible page from the 14th century. Did you know that one?
I didn't. That's that's the original.
That's Jesus' Bible right there. That's not true. From the 14th century. Jesus lived in the 1st century. But it's a page from Ezekiel. There's no special insignificance there. I just thought it was a cool one to get because I thought it looked cool at the person who was selling it.
Yeah.
I have the certificate to prove it's authentic. So I guess you can take it up with the seller if you don't think it is.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's in Latin, I think. And then that's a liturgy from Every Moment Holy, which is a great book. You should look it up.
Yeah.
But your question was...
Yeah, sorry.
Like,
so
what does a good Christian life look like? Or like how must we live as a Christian?
I suppose that's a interpret. Yeah, like if that means the same thing as what it means to live as if God exists.
I see. Yeah.
But, yeah, maybe I should clarify because live as if God exists is kind of weird. Maybe ideal Christian lifestyle would be, I don't know, because I feel like it's a fair thing to ask, because if that's Jordan's claim that is kind of what
like
is
if
a
I only
criteria.
ask as if God is real, I'll still be able to live X way. Like what is X way?
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, I guess when I think of, I guess I would say that, and I do say that we all ought to strive to live virtuously. I love the dichotomy of virtue and vice. Like vice being like things which hold us back, things which pull us away, things which like harm us and harm others around us through our own actions would be vice. So like there's the 7 deadly sins. I think that's a really great list of like common vices from which most other things flow. So that would be, I'm not going to be able to name all of them right now, but like pride, lust, greed, envy, sloth, so there's like laziness. Did I say gluttony?
No.
I don't think so. Gluttony, so like excessive consumption, and oh my gosh, and wrath, so anger, so like overpowering anger. I love that list. I think it's a great list, and like just take the opposite, like pride, humility, lust. Perhaps you could say the opposite is love, greed, like what was I gonna say? Magnanimity, so like giving, charity, and so on and so forth. Gluttony, temperance, like being able to like control yourself, self-control, another way to put that. And so like the flip side of the 7 deadly sins, I think there is a list out there like the 7 cardinal virtues or something like that. It's similar. Maybe it's like the 10 cardinal virtues. I don't know. But like to form those virtues in your life is the ultimate view of goodness. We're talking about the good life here. I am a virtue ethicist. Do you know much about ethics and like what different ethical systems are?
Not really, no.
Yeah, well, like
not by definition.
Virtue ethics, like I believe that a good life is a life lived by virtue, and that like an ethical system, like what is good and what is bad, can be judged. I haven't fully formed my ideas yet, and I haven't read much of virtue ethics like Plato's Republic, which I should read, but like to live a good life is to form one's life around virtues, and so to judge like is this good, is this bad, can be judged by how closely they align with virtues or vices. And
this would be in alignment with living as if God is real.
Yeah, and so I think that you can try to do that and just have that list of things. Like, am I going to? And I think that is that the scriptures also inform us as to what that virtuous life looks like under God. That God, I also believe in the natural law, so I believe that God has ordered creation and the world and humans in certain ways. That when we live those ways, we live well. Again, I don't want to say prosper, because that would get into prosperity theology, which is like, if I live according to God's law, I will get really rich. And I don't believe that at all.
That's interesting. I have
and that
stuff to
could
say
be
about
other
it, but-
discussion. That's a whole topic within Christianity that I don't even know if we've ever discussed. At least amongst some Christians, it's a topic of discussion. Dude, what is going on with my lights? Are you noticing this too?
Yeah.
What is happening? My lights are literally
experiencing
flickering as we're recording.
a potential power outage incoming. So if we pause randomly, it is because we are on the verge
What
of
is happening?
being sent back to the Stone Age.
And so I guess, and so like, it's so difficult for me to talk about this. I ought to form like a 5-minute elevator pitch for this. But like, live virtuously, and I believe that I cannot do that on my own alone. Both with other humans, but ultimately with God. Like, I think that actually God's presence is essential to that, because he is the fountain from which, I guess to use an analogy, like all of those virtues flow, all of that goodness flows, all of that power flows.
But I do, okay. Sorry, I don't mean to
And yeah, really quickly, I was about to finish, and that like, to align myself in that relationship with him actually like affects my ability to see and to live in accordance with those virtues. And I think you can get a lot of the benefits of that if you don't believe in God. Like, I would never want to say, but I don't think ultimately like that's the goal, because I believe the ultimate goal is God himself, who is the pinnacle of all virtue. This is why I really like, and I've benefited from Peterson's talking about just like virtue and what it means to live virtuously. And the way he talks about God, like I've heard him say, I actually heard this live when I saw him live, that like, so you want to improve your life sucks. You get a sense that you really shouldn't be, I don't know, drinking as much as you're drinking. Just use an example.
Yeah.
I drink. It's not a thing for me, but for many I know it is. And so like drinking, you shouldn't be drinking as much as you are. Where did you get that inclination? Like, where did you get that sense that you shouldn't be? Was it, and like, where are you getting this idea that you ought to change? Was it all inside of you already? If it was all inside of you already, then you would have known it already and you would have done it. So like, and he's not, I'm not saying it as well as he did, but he was not suggesting that there has to be some supernatural entity that's like pulling the strings in your brain. It was just like, there are things outside of yourself which affect you and affect the life that you're living. Like, you don't live in a solipsistic universe. Will's interested in solipsism, is what it's called, right?
There's two camps. I'll just say this briefly. There's two camps. There's solipsism and hard solipsism. I think hard solipsism is the idea that you're a solipsist that can't even prove that you're a solipsist. It's like a kind of recursive idea, but anyways, yeah.
But that like, there are things that are outside of yourself that affect you, you know, higher powers, if you will, like things that I have no control over that affect me in certain ways. Like, and that inclination, like maybe I look around and I see other people's lives and I see that they live well and that they're doing things that I'm not doing, and I'm like, man, maybe I ought to do that. Like exercise. That's a great example. Like, people exercise, they have good lives, you know, they look good, they feel good, they have well-ordered lives. Like, maybe I ought to exercise. Like, if all of that was in me already, I never would have needed to see those other people or see the way they were living. And the way that I kind of take that is like, if I take all those things and like pull them together, it points me towards God. That's how I view it. If I take, you know, seeing someone exercising and I'm like, oh, I want to be like that guy. He looks great. You know, he's friendly. I might have interacted with him some. Like, that's cool. That's like a virtue that I'm seeing that's calling me into itself. And ultimately, I think all of those things find their, because like he got that somewhere, and whoever he got it from got it somewhere, and he saw a YouTube video that inspired him, and the guy in the YouTube video, you know, somehow, I think that's a ladder that leads to God. That's more of like a personal thing. I can't necessarily prove that, I guess, but that's kind of how Peterson has affected me, I guess, is he's, and many other things have helped me see that too in my own life, but he was a part of that for me. And I think that like, and that would lend itself to an argument for God, which we ought to talk about arguments for God at some point. Oh, yeah. But I kind of see that in line with the ontological argument for God, that like, just by definition, God is the being greater than which there is no other, right? That would kind of be a framing of the ontological argument.
Yeah,
And
just,
so, like,
just real quickly, I just wanted to
go
just
ahead.
to I
Yeah, you said you wanted to interject. Sorry.
No, you're good. Just to close on your other point, I just want to ask: is this like this whole like living by virtue thing, where you were talking about how it's different to witness virtue kind of manifest in front of you
Mm-hmm.
than to just kind of already know that there is that virtue that you can kind of cultivate or harvest for yourself? Is it kind of, are you saying that like belief in God in a way, I'm not saying as a totality of your view, but in a way is like kind of putting on these I don't know, like these this is gonna sound like really superficial,
lay it on me.
but like these like goggles,
Yeah.
like these God goggles that when you put them on, you just kind of see virtue as opposed to needing a reference of seeing it in manifest in someone else. If that makes sense.
I think it does. That like if I didn't have the God goggles in your example, like I would look around and I just wouldn't be able to see the virtue or God in those virtues.
Almost like you said, you could still see them in other people, but with these God goggles, you wouldn't need to see them in other people. You would just kind of see them like inherently. Like you would just kind of know inherently.
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying. Perhaps I've misspoken, but so thank you for that. I think that these are apparent to everyone, to see virtue, to desire to live virtuously. Maybe not. I don't know if I would want to say that they're apparent to everyone, because there are people who live very differently and who do not live virtuously and live in ways that I would disagree with, but who, and I'm talking about like absolutely crazy, like, deep like masochism, sadism, like really bad stuff. Like deep in addictions, those sorts of things. That's what I'm thinking of when I'm talking about this, and they might be fine with that. But like, I think everyone has a sense of right and wrong. I think that like you see virtues, and like what Jordan Peterson has kind of nudged me in the direction of is like, as you see that, like what are you seeing? And I think the natural kind of end of that process is an experience or a acknowledgement of the holy, the divine.
I see.
The
So it's
true.
more like a ladder
It's
to
not
something rather than just doing it and kind of feeling like it's going nowhere.
Yeah, I guess, because this is what why I would want to say that, like, belief in God is, and to act as if is fine. Like, if you want to do that, that's great. I think your life will improve. Whether you like do that from a Christian perspective or not, I think it improves, because I think that's because God actually is real, and we are ordered to live in that way as if He was real. But like to live in that way orients you towards like these virtues, something outside of yourself, something bigger than yourself, and to take that to its actual end, you will ultimately end up encountering the divine or the holy somehow in some way, because it is there. And I guess that's where I would lean on like the arguments for God's existence. That's kind of what takes me there.
Yeah.
Like I see the virtues, like where are these coming from? Like why am I inclined to live this way and not this way? Why do I even have a sense that I ought to live this way and not that way? And so like living with those virtues, the simple answer to your question, like faith, hope, and love, like really having those ingrained in your life, and like others oriented towards service, towards love, towards help, and like living that way is a true like spirit-filled life or something, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Marked with peace and love, and like strength. And so that's like a simple question to your answer. That was a long way to get there.
Yeah.
And like to truly live those and to like pursue those ultimately will orient you towards God and encountering Him somehow, somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether or not you like work with that and like go with that or not is up to you, and like might look different for different people. But ultimately, I believe there is a true God, and to worship Him and follow Him is concrete in ways myriad that we can talk about throughout or whatever.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is hard to talk about. I don't know.
is.
I feel like I'm really doing a bad job.
Well, no,
but
I mean, I think, and I'm just going to like say this briefly
Yeah.
again, I think that just on the record, I think we're going to have a lot of ideas that we're just going to say that are
I'm
not
really,
going to be that well formed.
Yeah, this is not well formed at all in my mind.
And I'm not saying that yours aren't well formed. I'm just saying that getting the kind of real time kind of thinking of it out is because I'm doing it right now as you're speaking.
Yeah.
And I have a lot to say about everything that you just, especially because it sounds like what you're saying is as a summary for your argument. I know that everyone has multiple. This is like one category. Mm-hmm. This sounds like a morality kind of reasoning for God, and I don't like the morality is a big thing, but I will just say that what I find really interesting about what you just said is from my secular viewpoint. Mm-hmm. I think my biggest difference between what you're talking about is that those virtues that you mention, and even the what'd you call them, the 7 deadly sins? Yeah. I think that those are also manifestable and usable and defensible from a secular worldview as well, because when we talk about things like and it's interesting what you mentioned about not just doing things just for prosperity. I would actually agree with that, because if we're using prosperity in the sense that it's just complete self-interest and you're just doing it for greed, which is one of those I would disagree. I would agree with you that that's a bad reason to live virtuously for that end goal. But what I find interesting is that to me it seems like those vices have beneficial reasons personally and interpersonally in society. Even
you mean vices like the wrong things?
Oh, sorry, did I say vices? I meant virtues.
I was let me make sure. I was like, let me make sure I'm following your argument.
Yeah, thank you for that. That they have their own. Man, I just lost my train of thought.
They're beneficial even if you don't believe in God.
Right.
I guess. What you're saying.
But also for the same reasons, they're beneficial for the same reasons as if you believe in God. The way you described, I think, is what I'm trying to get at, because living virtuously, in my secular viewpoint, would be to, it could start in I'll say selfish in quotations kind of way, because when I say selfish, I really just mean in the interest of yourself, not for a greedy kind of reason. Mm-hmm. But self-preservation is a thing. It is virtuous for me to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner because that is in the best interest of my well-being. Mm. And that's just one of those things where it's I wouldn't say that it's moral in a sense for me to do those things, but it's beneficial for me to do those things.
Live virtuously.
Yeah. And I think that also translates when it comes to the treatment of other people, because you can't harbor a society that lives virtuously if you condone or allow vices to take over. Mm-hmm. Even if you say objectively that there is quote unquote nothing wrong with those vices in and of themselves. Mm-hmm. To say that murder is it doesn't matter whether or not you kill someone. What does it matter in the grand scheme of things if there's no God? Yeah. I would, and this is going to be a hot take. Mm-hmm. I think if you bottle that statement, I think that's true. Mm-hmm. Because in the grand sense, in relation to what? Yeah. There's we live in this universe and we are kind of born from inanimacy and we go back to inanimacy. But there's a hard but in there. What I see a lot of people doing, which I think is horrible, is to take that bottled statement and to say, okay, well, just because there is nothing wrong with this statement in relation to something grander, it doesn't mean that we can call that statement correct. Mm-hmm. Because to me, the way that I see it is that the universe kind of operates in the same way that the rules of chess do. So if you have a chessboard laid out in front of you, it's, even if there is no chessboard maker or chess piece maker, you still have to operate within the rules of chess. And those rules, you could say, are manifested in the laws of physics or whatever. And this is interesting because when it comes down to living morally, I would say that the rules that we're given are, and I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, the rules that we are given are that our consciousness, our experience, the way that we experience things, the way that we feel pain, the way that we feel in general. And so you can say as a foundation that because living beings, not just humans, but because living beings feel pain, which is the feeling of getting away from danger that puts your life at risk, you can use that, I would say, almost a presupposition, to saying that we can start with this, and we can say what is in the best interest.
Pain, is that what we're starting with?
Yeah, you can start with pain. You can say, why do we experience pain? Well, it seems that we experience pain because if we didn't experience pain, we would be dead. Because pain is what tells us, hey, something is wrong, this is threatening your life, and if we didn't have that, we would be dead. So there is some indicator that is physically assigned to us that says, hey, this is bad. And it's funny because, like, that word bad is... I don't quite know what that means.
Would you say it's synonymous with pain, then?
Yeah. Because then you could also say, okay, well, even if we feel pain, and even if we say that that's bad, why do we have to listen? And to that I would just say, and this may sound circular, and this is something that I might have to do more thinking on. I would say...
You're saying, like, if we're not feeling pain, why ought we still live virtuously? Or were you saying something completely different?
I was saying more so like, okay, so if we feel pain and we say that that's bad,
yes,
why is that bad?
I see.
So that's the question that I'm posing, kind of to myself and maybe to you as well. But the way that I would, because I feel like that's the natural question to ask. So then you'd say, why is that bad? To me, and this is probably why I would call it like presuppositional, because that is just how consciousness like the negative perception that our consciousness experiences when we feel pain is the bad, is what I would say. So I think the question of, well, why is it bad is a senseless question, because there is no why, it just is.
Yeah,
if that
it's
makes
like
sense.
We naturally want to avoid pain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to go further than that.
Right. Yeah. So I would start there.
We all have an experiential knowledge of the fact that we don't want to feel pain.
Right.
So it's universal in that sense. Right?
Yeah. And you could even, and I'll say, like, you're always going to have outlier situations like, oh, well, what about people born without pain receptors? What about people who are born with terrible mental illness, who are suicidal? Is that a natural indicator that they're supposed to be dead? I would obviously say no.
Yeah.
And it's the reasoning why I would say no is because when we see people like that, who are suicidal, who are physically incapable of feeling pain, the immediate diagnosis is that something is wrong, because that is against what is usual. That is against what we see normally in life.
So the universal standard is just like the majority, I guess, would you say?
I don't know if majority is the right word. It's an interesting question, because now imagine a civilization where everyone is born with no pain receptors. Would it, like, that is interesting. Because
I think, and I'm not trying to do gotcha here. I think hypotheticals like that are helpful to a point, but I try not to think as much in hypotheticals anymore. For this is a kind of a me thing, as much as like what actually is, just kind of like what you said.
Yeah, that's
so I'm
fair.
not trying to say like, well, what if there was a no pain receptor civilization or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just trying to food for thought as you continue.
Sure. Yeah. So we can just focus on what is, and what is that we know that we feel pain. We know that it's bad because it's just kind of self-evident. I don't really think that there's a way that you can dive deeper into that. Pain is defined as bad, and So you start there. You recognize that that is something that the universe has naturally created, and then you kind of go forward and develop a system in which you can minimize the experience of pain. It's in everyone's best interest to encourage that kind of behavior interpersonally between each other, and that harbors a society where there is an overall reduction of pain for everyone, which is the best possible outcome for every single person involved. Now, I don't really see if I were to map the similarities between living as if God exists with the virtue system that you described and this like secular morality system that I'm describing, if I were to map one for one like the benefits of each system to each other, I wouldn't see where the disconnect is. So and that's just to say that like I don't see the difference between living as if God exists and living in a more kind of secular virtue system where those virtues are good just because they're self-evidently good.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of straying away from the question here, so I think that I might want to put a pause.
Oh, yeah, sure.
After I respond, and you're welcome to respond as well. I don't just want to get the last word. And maybe get back to some of the Peterson content before we wrap up. But it sounds like we're actually at a bit of a difference here, which maybe we can talk more about in the conversation about ethics. Because in my system, I think I perhaps poorly described like a virtue system where like the virtues all come from a giver of the virtues. Like you can make up whatever. Like I could say that like punching Will in the face is a virtue because God told me that wills deserve to be punched in the face, and like I just live virtuously, and now I do that. Like you could imagine, you can make up whatever virtues you want, but like there is actually a system. There are virtues that are partially evident through human nature and through lived experience, but become fully evident like as we experience God and learn from that, and like are in community, and I would also say like actually encounter God truly through the Christian scriptures and through the church. But that's a lot more than we can bite off the chew here maybe. But then it sounded like you were getting at maybe more of a utilitarian system about avoiding pain, which is part of how I understand utilitarianism, which I think we've talked about some before, utilitarianism, right?
Yeah, and I just want to quickly say, I would say mostly it's definitely birthed from utilitarian kind of viewpoint, but I would also say it's more hybrid.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I've actually had some interesting discussions where like virtue ethics kind of becomes utilitarianism in the end, and utilitarianism becomes virtue ethics in the end.
Yeah, there's always
it's really interesting actually.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant. Like we should definitely have a conversation about that at some point. But I guess, yeah, I wanted to ask you, because we have more notes here.
Yeah.
We have so much more content.
I know.
And it's been like an hour already. Hasn't it been an hour? It's been over an hour.
It's been an hour and 7 minutes.
Oh my god. Yeah. That is crazy. I checked my watch like 10 minutes ago, and it was 9 o'clock, and I was like, oh my gosh. We've been recording for almost an hour.
It really just goes by.
It literally feels like it's been like 15 minutes.
Now I know why podcasts are so long.
Oh my gosh.
Honestly.
It literally feels like we've been here for 15 minutes. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been talking mostly, and I feel bad about that.
No, it's been interesting to hear.
But, I don't know. What do you think about Peterson's content?
Like just in
to
general?
talk about, because you took a lot more than notes.
That's true.
So I'd be curious what more of your notes you had. I mean, if it was all just questions you had for me as someone who does believe in God, then I'm happy to keep talking. But I really want to hear more of your thoughts and stuff.
Yeah, I did have a few things that I wanted to say. One of which I thought it was really interesting, that whole wrestling with God thing that Peterson was talking about. I think he said what was actually really cool. I didn't know, but I think he said that that story that he was telling in this video that we watched about this guy who was like physically wrestling with God, ended up becoming some kind of metaphor or like for like Israel. And then that kind of became like, you know, the chosen people of God are the people who struggle with God. And I think that's a paraphrasing of what he said, but that is kind of exactly what he was saying, because like that kind of idea of I think you were talking about this too, where like it's not just that you believe in God and then everything is like right in your head.
Hunky dory.
Yeah. Like the struggling part is the necessary component, because you need to have that inner conflict with an effort to actually work towards that
some sort of goal.
Yeah,
or something.
I would say like an asymptotical kind of approach to being a true Christian, or being a perfect Christian.
Or like we could even just say like living a good life.
Yeah.
Perhaps, right?
And so I thought that was interesting, and again, I always have to bring it back to my secular viewpoint, because that's where I'm rooted in.
Yeah.
So I have to say that what that struck me as is kind of a skeptic worldview, because to struggle with God, I guess this could also have different interpretations. I don't think he means struggle with belief of God, but struggle with not becoming God, but I would say becoming like the most ideal version of yourself that you could be under God.
Living a good life.
Yeah. Sure. So we'll call so struggling with God would be working towards a good life, in your opinion. Okay.
Well, okay. I think that I agree with kind of your assessment of it, and that might be what Peterson's getting at. I would call wrestling with God something different, but I like that still.
You're right. Okay.
I guess does that make sense?
Yeah. That's kind of I was just asking kind of a clarifying.
Because I think that's a good thing. I
Right.
think we all ought to struggle towards a better life.
Yeah.
Struggle towards, I would say, virtue. Struggle towards goodness. Struggle towards beauty. Struggle towards truth. And those are struggles, and they're good struggles that are worthwhile.
Yeah.
In our actual lived lives daily. But I think that wrestling with God can look like that. It can also look different. Like there actually can be a wrestling with God of like, God, I don't want to do this. I feel so alone, God. Like, where are you? I feel empty, God. Why am I empty now that I got to this place where I thought I would be fulfilled? Those sorts of questions I would also consider wrestling with God, but that presupposes that there's actually a personal God who's listening.
Right. Which is like,
So I would consider both wrestling with God. Because part of that could be like, oh God, I don't want to get out of bed today.
Right.
That's a wrestling with God in some sense, but also like the where are you, God? Which I think maybe everyone can relate to in some sense, like an existential loneliness almost. Yeah. But I think it looks different for the Christian than for maybe
I feel
others.
like that's because to me what that sounds like is inner struggle, and wrestling with God I would interpret through my secular lens as wrestling with yourself, and that's not to call yourself God. I'm not saying that, but in a sense that like we all make decisions and we struggle with those decisions because there, in my view, there is no tangible kind of answer that we can cling on to, but the answers that we're looking for are ones that we have to trek that journey for ourselves manually, and the road isn't always, or the path isn't always clear in terms of how we can get to our destination or answer those questions that we're struggling with. And to me, that I would define that as wrestling with God in this sense, in kind of Jordan Peterson's language here, but I would also say in a secular worldview, that's like a perfectly natural occurrence because of the fact that, we have to find those answers for ourselves, and that they're not necessarily like on this like pedestal or shelf that we can just kind of grab and it's like something that we have to introspectively search for. if that makes sense. And it's not easy, and it's
Yeah.
something that we will get wrong, that Christians will get wrong, that atheists will get wrong. It's something that is, it seems to be universal, and to me, the universality of it feels, in a way, evident that there is more this secular reality where, irrespective of religious belief or no belief, there seems to be a common factor between those two worldviews.
Yeah.
And so to live...
The secular and the theist, you mean?
Yeah. And so to live as if God exists and to not... or to live as if God doesn't exist seems to me to share common factors, which I find interesting. And I guess I should clarify that the living as if God exists also will entail like believing. So both belief and living accordingly seems to also overlap with non-belief and living in the same kind of way.
Yeah. I think it overlaps, absolutely. But I would even, and maybe this would be a good place to wrap up, I think I believe there's overlap because there actually is a true good life that we're all meant to live, and that true life is ordered by a higher power who has universally made that order for all. But it sounds like you would disagree that it doesn't presuppose that there is some sort of rule that has been set, or that you mentioned nature, that nature might be that rule. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I think, and by the way, this is probably the point on which I'm estimating that I will most likely develop as we have these conversations and as I learn more, because at some point, from the secular perspective, at some point down the road, you have to hit I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think the core difference between the theist worldview and the atheist worldview is that for the theist worldview, the end of the road is God. For the secularist worldview, it's I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I think that the I have no idea, when people hear that, they kind of insert their own meaning onto that. Like, oh, if you don't know, then you don't know anything. And I don't think that's true, because you can, without a foundation, you can still start with, you can still have a logic system that's logically consistent within that system. Again, going back to the chess example, you don't need to have where did the chessboard come from to know how to play chess accordingly to the rules of chess. So, for example, you walk into a room, you see a chessboard, you don't know how it got there, but you can still play chess.
I would say, though, that's because you have learned the rules of chess because someone taught them to you, which is an outside entity giving you the rules. Well,
so for me, this, we might have to...
And this is the ethics conversation.
Yeah.
That's
interesting. I suspected that you would kind of have a reasoning like that. I think that for me, the rules of chess are strictly bound by physics, the laws of physics. That would be. That's because I think that's as far as we can get into. Again, it's like I have to hit that I don't know, but what we do know is, going past that we do have laws of physics, that they operate consistently, that we can make predictions, and so we can operate logically within that system even if we don't have that prior causation of it.
And I appreciate this. Takes me back to Will is into Matt Dillahunty some. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
I listened to a debate that Matt Dillahunty had where he advocated for humanities, we can still live a good life, but we don't need God. And people say well, who gives us the rules to the good life if there is no God? And it seemed that he just kind of had that bottom line of just we have these things that we naturally see that they are good for people and that people live good lives by doing them. Why can we not just say that is inherent to the biological framework of a human? Is that a fair framing of kind of what he might have said at some point? Yeah,
and that's even if it wasn't, which I think he did, that's what I would probably more so align myself with.
Yeah. And I think that's just a really interesting idea. I think that it's just different bottom lines for different people, and we can talk more about that at some point. But And I think that the like acting as if question gets at that same thing
Yeah.
of like we just draw our bottom lines differently. Like I would say like, well, here we have all these things in nature, blah blah blah, virtue, vice, whatever, and there's like a God outside of it who's ordered the entire system. And you would say like, well, there is the system. Why do we even need an outside creator? We see self-evidently that the system is complete in and of itself.
For morality, yeah.
For morality, okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's just a difference, and I'm curious to parse out more of that difference and what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure.
And to just kind of, Will's articulated his position very well, I think. To articulate like the Christian position or just my own personal position, it's like I would say that like that kind of fallenness. Well, I just used the word. That like kind of striving and the struggle with oneself that we see evident in humanity all over the world and in ourselves is because of the fall or because of original sin, whatever you want to call it, in the scriptures, that like humanity somehow we've gotten to where we are now in which we are separated from God, and there is this struggle, there is this gap, there is this bridge that we must cross, and that's, I believe, what like a lot of the Christian life is about and what true belief in Christ is about. But I mean, that's into Christian theology, which is not what we're talking about today. So.
Yeah, which I mean, again, I'd love to get into that at some point later.
But God, we've been going for a while now.
Yeah, we're at an hour 20.
All right. Well, hard cap is 1:30, so I say we cut it now.
Yeah, I'd say.
Unless you had more to add. I think this is a good place to stop.
That's a good place to stop. I think that we wrapped up. There's probably some things that we still want to get to.
Like more. So we have some notes here specifically about. The Peterson talks about the parable of the young ruler, in which he says, "Oh, that's actually different," but he does talk about that.
Yeah.
Like the sheep and the goats. Some will say to me, "Lord, Lord," and I'll say, "I did not know you." What does it mean to like say that God exists and try to live that way, but not measure up to it?
Yeah, I think overall though we attacked the actual main.
I think this was great.
Yeah,
there's like specific things that are super interesting that we had to talk about, but we'll get to something sometime. So
yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. If you've made it this far, Chris, do you have any other closing words?
No, thanks. If you did listen this far, God bless you. Thank you, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope that this discussion has been fruitful for you. I've really enjoyed it with Will. I'm just saying it for myself so that my pride doesn't get in front of me. But if this gets 0 views and me and Will just got to hang out for an hour and a half and talk about interesting things and Jordan Peterson and why we believe what we believe, then I'd consider that absolutely a fruitful evening. So thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you, Will.
A win-win. Thank you, Chris. Again, much appreciated. All right.